The Robert and Penny Fox Historic Costume Collection was founded as an educational resource for the students of Drexel University. Today, the collection is estimated to hold more than 20,000 objects and remains a vital part of the curriculum at the Westphal College of Media Arts and Design. The upcoming exhibition, Chasing the Dragon, China in the Western Imagination, is an attempt to have a conversation about chinoiserie in fashion and chinoiserie in the fashion archive.
Chinoiserie is a term that's come to be used for works of art and furniture and design fashion, which is in some way influenced by East Asia, particularly China.
All historic costume collections have garments that we would now consider examples of cultural appropriation. How do we share these objects while acknowledging their problematic history? These are complicated objects. We are fortunate to have Phil Chan as our Rankin Scholar at Westphal College to facilitate these difficult conversations among students, faculty, and staff.
I met Phil Chan right before the pandemic, and we've always talked about how can we develop something for the Drexel University community, having these pieces that would otherwise literally sit in the closet as being inauthentic, but instead being able to highlight that, to point it out that this piece is not authentic, and yet how it is inspired by authentic Chinese pieces.
I think this exhibition is particularly interesting as our society becomes more multiracial, multicultural. I think we as artists need to figure out how we can cross cultural borders with integrity, and part of that is looking to the past to see how we've done that before, and using that context will provide clues for today's artists. I think it can be really challenging when we are talking about culture, especially culture that feels like it belongs to us, that we have a personal connection with. And it feels challenging to have these conversations because it is so personal. So I am Chinese, I'm from Hong Kong, so I grew up with a lot of the symbols and the cultural products that are nodded to in this show. And so to be able to live with my own discomfort in it, but also appreciate an object that might be beautiful, those two things sometimes feel incongruent or dissonant in some ways. But I think a lot of our history is really being able to see that nuance, see that discomfort, and to not just dismiss something as problematic, but also say, okay, there's also something interesting or beautiful or revolutionary or worth something here that is worth talking about or worth being a jumping point for another inspiration. I feel like there's so much we can learn from each individual piece in this show. I mean, I think it asks us questions like, what does it mean to costume a Chinese body? What does Chinese culture through clothing look like? But also, how does Chinese culture manifest through the eyes of an outsider? What are we seeing through the eyes of an outsider that we might not see in our own native culture? A lot of those questions come up in this show, and it feels like we have a lot of those answers already as individuals. Like, we know when we see a dragon, a particular kind of dragon, it says China to us, right? The title of the show is Chasing the Dragon. What does that mean? That's loaded with so much. And so having a physical object in a show gives us a chance to come face to face with some of those symbols, really take a pause and ask ourselves some of these questions. And that's what I'm hoping that this show does, is to give us a chance to pause and reflect on our own identities, but also how are we crossing other cultures with integrity from where we stand. I think the show would be super interesting to any artistic person who wants to transcend their own cultural borders. So if you're inspired by a folk tale from Africa, or you're inspired from a legend from Scandinavia or a South American design, how do you incorporate that into your work as an artist, as a filmmaker, as a composer? This show will provide a lot of questions, rich, stimulating questions, to help you find some of those contours for your own artistic practice. So that's, even if you're not specifically a clothes person, I think this show will ask any creative person some of these critical questions about crossing cultural boundaries.